The Mystery of the Chinese Ring by Andy Adams. Chapter 1. A Mysterious Gift. Biff Brewster was suddenly awake, wide awake. The grey light of dawn outlined the window of his first-floor bedroom. Something, or someone, was outside. He felt sure of it. Something had prodded him out of his deep sleep with startling suddenness. For a moment he lay still, eyes on the window, his ears sharply tuned for the slightest sound. He knew, of course, that he might have been awakened by a stray dog or a night-prowling cat, but he didn't think so. Very carefully, Biff slipped out of his bed. Barefooted, he padded noiselessly towards the window, taking care to remain outside the dim shaft of early light coming through. He moved to one side of the window and peered out cautiously. He detected a slight movement beneath a gnarled apple tree about 30 feet away. Then, suddenly, swiftly, a figure emerged from behind the protection of the tree's drooping limbs. The figure came at a run towards the window. It was a man, small and slight of build. He was wearing blue jeans and a sweatshirt. On the shirt's front there was an athletic letter. Biff couldn't make it out, cut from luminous cloth, making it glow faintly in the dawn's light. Biff drew back, pressing his body against the wall. A moment later, a white object, the size of a baseball, came hurtling into the room, tearing a hole in the screen. It fell with a dull plop on Biff's pillow. Biff held his breath, waiting. The man was leaving the yard on the run. At the sidewalk, he slowed to a casual saunter. Apparently he did not want to risk attracting the attention of some early riser. Biff waited. He counted slowly to 100 to make sure his strange visitor was gone. Once more he looked out of the window. Nothing moved in the eerie light of the dawn. Biff turned away. Had he waited a few seconds longer, he would have seen two men leave the shadows of a corner tree and stealthily follow the hurler of the object. Biff snapped on the reading light by his bed and picked up the object that had been tossed through his window. It was a round white rock, one of those used to outline his mother's herb garden. More interesting was the heavy piece of twine tied tightly round it. At the other end of the twine was a ring. It was a man's heavy ring, set with a square-cut green stone. Biff examined it carefully. The stone was dull, not glittering. He wasn't sure, but he thought it was jade. He looked at the ring more closely. On its face there was an intricately etched marking. A design, he wondered? No, it looks more like Chinese writing. Twisted into a knot around the ring was a small piece of paper. Biff unfolded it carefully and smoothed it out. "Fortune shines upon, and the gods protect, the wearer of this ring," he read. Protect, Biff thought angrily. Why, that rock could have conked me but good if I hadn't left my bed. Biff reread the printed message. Now what, just what, he thought, has this got to do with me? He stretched out on his bed, cupping his hands behind his head, and stared at the ceiling. Unable to read any sense into the message, or the mysterious manner in which the ring had come to him, Biff jumped out of bed and made for the shower. Under the pelting needle-like spray, he threw back his broad shoulders and let the water sting his face and soak his light brown hair. Afterward, he toweled himself vigorously, dressed quickly, and placed the ring on his key chain. He knew his father would be up, even though it was only 6:30. Maybe his father would have some ideas about this, or, at least, a couple of good guesses. Biff bounded into the kitchen. "Morning, Dad. Say, what do you think happened?" He stopped short as he saw his mother come out of the pantry. He didn't want to mention the ring incident in front of her. Not yet, anyway. Not until he had discussed it with his father. He knew his mother already was worried enough about his impending trip to far-off Rangoon. Tomorrow was the day he was leaving. "Good morning, Biff," his father greeted him. "What were you saying?" I was just saying it so happens I'm hungry enough to eat a crocodile." "Good morning, Mother. What's for breakfast?" "Certainly not crocodile," Mrs. Brewster replied. "Even if you and your father do say crocodile steaks are delicious." Ugh. She gave a quick shudder. Father and son looked at one another and smiled. They had had to eat crocodile on their Brazilian adventure when their food supplies had run short. "What's on the programme this nice bright Saturday morning?" Biff's mother asked, putting large portions of scrambled eggs and bacon before Biff and his father. Before a reply could be made, Biff's brother and sister, Ted and Monica, 11-year-old twins, burst into the room. "Hi, Mum. Hi, Dad," they shouted together. "Gee, Biff, just think, tomorrow you'll be on your way to Rangoon in Burma to visit Uncle Charlie," Ted said enviously. "Wish I could go too," Monica chimed in. "You? Why, you're a girl," Ted said derisively. "Now, no arguments, you two," Mrs. Brewster said. "Drink your orange juice. I'll start your eggs." "How far from Indianapolis is it to Rangoon?" Monica asked. "Quite a way, 6,000 or 7,000 miles at least," Mr. Brewster replied. "You ever been there, Dad?" Ted asked. "No, I envy Biff. Rangoon is one of the places in this world I've missed so far." "And about the only one, Dad, isn't it?" Biff asked. "There are a few others," his father replied. "Maybe if I started out as young as you are, I'd have made them too. For a 16-year-old, you've been about this world of ours quite a bit, me boy-o. Well, I'm all for it." "I am too, Dad," Biff agreed. "Remember the time in Brazil when we—" "Hold it," Mrs. Brewer interrupted, laughing. "Don't you two get started talking about your adventures. There's just this one more day before Biff leaves, and my goodness, what a lot has to be done." Biff smiled. He knew there was hardly anything left to be done. His mother had finished packing for him the day before. Just as Mrs. Brewster brought the twins their eggs, the telephone rang. Monica started to get up. She answered every phone call. "You sit still and eat those eggs while they're hot, young lady. I'll take the call," Mrs. Brewster said. Biff and his father saw a puzzled look come over her face as she answered the telephone. "Yes, I understand. This morning? All right, I'll tell them." When she returned to the breakfast table, she said, "That was Charlie's friend, that Chinese merchant, Mr. Ling. Ling Tang, isn't it?" "Why, yes. What did he want?" Tom Brewster asked. "He said it is most urgent that you and Biff see him before Biff leaves for Rangoon." Chapter 2. Beware, Biff. "I think we'd better get down to Ling Tang's shop this morning," Mr. Brewster said. "It must be something important for him to have called so early, especially if he knows Biff is leaving for Burma tomorrow." Biff waited until his father had finished his second cup of coffee and then rose from the table. "All set, Dad?" he asked. "I'll get the car." Not until they were in the car did Biff bring up the subject of the ring. "What do you think of this, Dad?" He took the chain from his pocket, removed the ring, and placed it in his father's hand. Thomas Brewster looked at the ring carefully. "It's a beautiful ring, Jade. Where did you get it?" "Someone threw it at me this morning," Biff said, a grin on his tanned face. "Threw it at you? What do you mean?" Biff explained quickly, then handed the note to his father. "Read this." Mr. Brewster read the words, "Fortune shines upon and the gods protect the wearer of this ring." He looked back at his son, shaking his head in puzzlement. "This is all? You haven't got any idea who the man was?" "Not the faintest, Dad." Mr. Brewster studied the ring again. "Jade, and it looks Chinese. That call from Ling Tang may be connected with this in some way." "Hey, maybe you've hit on something," Biff exclaimed. It was 9 o'clock when Biff and his father entered the small Chinese curio shop of Ling Tang. Ling Tang, a small, neat man in his middle 30s, greeted them with a deep bow. "You honor my humble establishment by your presence," he said. "Rather it is you who honor us by inviting us here," Mr. Brewster replied, falling easily into the polite form of greeting used by the Chinese. Ling Tang's shop was filled with graceful Chinese urns and vases, beautifully decorated with green and red dragons, flowers, and tree-filled valleys. Chinese fans hung from wires stretched from wall to wall. In glass-covered cases were carved idols of jade and delicate pieces of ivory. A heavy aroma of incense filled the small store. Ling Tang had attended Butler University in Indianapolis with Charles Keene, the uncle Biff was going to visit. They had become close friends, and this had led to a friendship with the entire Brewster family. On graduating, Ling Tang had returned to China. After several years, when the political atmosphere of Red China had put a stern, cruel check on freedom of movement and freedom of speech, Ling Tang had fled his beloved country and returned to America. He had opened his shop and thrived. "We received your message, Tang," Mr. Brewster said. Ling Tang placed the tips of his long, well-cared-for fingers together. "It is true that your son goes to Burma soon?" "Yes, tomorrow." Tang's face remained expressionless. "Perhaps what I have to tell you is of no importance. I do not wish to alarm you." He paused. "This trip was arranged several months ago?" Biff and his father nodded their heads. "And there has been no attempt to keep it secret?" "There was no need to," Thomas Brewster stated. "I wonder, was the boy's trip not arranged when my good friend Charles Keene visited here last?" "Yes, but I don't see," Biff began. "Your Uncle Charles has just returned from Cape Canaveral, has he not?" Biff nodded his head. Uncle Charlie had been in the Navy for several years. He was a pilot in the squadron of planes assigned to tracking missiles fired from the Cape into the South Atlantic. It was the squadron's task to recover the instrument-loaded nose cones dropped from the powerful rockets. Uncle Charlie had bounced around the world quite a bit. He had flown a fighter plane during the Korean conflict and had traveled as much as he could about the Orient in his furlough time. He remained in the Navy following Korea and was delighted when he was assigned to Canaveral. But after 2 years there, his traveling feet told him, "I want out." So he had resigned his commission to join an old pilot friend establishing a fleet of planes from Explorations Unlimited in Burma. Charles Keene wanted badly to get back to the Orient. He was fascinated by the Eastern countries so different from his own. "I'm interested in the money, too," he told the Brewster family on his visit. "There's plenty of American businesses building up in the Orient. Flying for this outfit in Burma is real opportunity and big money. I want some of both before I'm too old." Explorations Unlimited had its headquarters at Unhao on the Irrawaddy River, northeast of Rangoon, near the Chinese border. "Why don't you ship Biff out to me for a few weeks?" Uncle Charlie had suggested. "He could get a glimpse of the other side of the world. Learn a lot, too." Those words had been music to Biff's young ears. A family council had been held, and it had been agreed that the trip would be a good way for Biff to spend the remainder of his summer vacation. "About a month after your uncle's visit," Tang continued, "2 men, countrymen of mine, traveling on Burmese passports, arrived here. They asked many questions about your uncle." "I still don't see what that has to do with Biff's going to Rangoon," Mr. Brewster said. "I try your patience," Tang said. "Now to my point. Only last night, these 2 same men came again to our city. This time, they were most curious about your son, Biff." End of chapter 2.